down and listen to records. Smell the cover, read all the verses. Tell me about your favorites on Vinyl and Vision.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. Here we are with episode 123. Today's very special guest is Matt Martinez. Before I start to describe who my guest is and what we are discussing tonight, I'd just like to say thank you very much for being here with me and tuning in. I am actually in this week that this episode is being released. I am celebrating I am acknowledging my 5th year anniversary doing this podcast, which I didn't think was ever going to happen. Never thought about it really. But yeah, here we are 5 years later. At episode 123. I've never ever been very consistent to keeping to a schedule. That is my own doing. It's my own fault. It's because I'm a one-man operation here. It's not like I have to rely on anybody to help me do these things. But pretty cool that I've made it this far, I think. And we have more in store already. We already have some stuff lined up. Took a bit of a break here since my last episode till now. So thank you. Thank you very much for joining me. Today's guest is Matt Martinez. So Matt is a musician, bassist from Phoenix, Arizona. He is currently in a band called Common Wounds. They have a new album coming out called All Night Blood. It's coming out October 18th, 2024. It is currently in pre-order status for vinyl. There are 3 different variants that I saw that look fucking cool and amazing. I'm looking forward to picking up my own copy. You go to allnightblood.com and you will lead you to the link tree of theirs where you can find everything related to this release. It's coming out on Protagonist Music, which this is actually going to be Protagonist Music's 100th release. So congratulations to them as well. That is also a pretty astounding landmark for any independent label. And they're doing good work because these vinyl pressings look pretty fucking fabulous. And from what Matt has described to me in our conversation, as far as like what will be included in that package, as far as the artwork is concerned, sounds pretty cool. First single off of the album is called Broken Hands. You're listening to that now. At the end of the episode, I will include a short clip of their second single, Mile Marker. Common Wounds and this album in particular, All Night Blood, they're a heavy rock band. So you may consider them a noise rock band. That's not far off. That's not incorrect. Matt's choice for an album to discuss was Drive Like Jehu's Yank Crime. I have never gotten into that album well. Okay, I don't think my brain. I think my brain was too soft when I first heard that record that I just didn't. I couldn't compute. Okay, but it's definitely something that I can get into now. I certainly appreciate it at this point in my life, and I think it's a fantastic fucking record. There's so much good stuff about it. As far as research is concerned, very difficult to find things about this album, but I did the best that I could with the information given, and I think that Matt and I had a great conversation, and I'm very thankful for it, and I hope you enjoy it too. If you do, please do all the things you do with the internet. Like, share, subscribe, comment, rate, review is what we say here. Those all help immensely, and considering it's my 50th anniversary, please do. Okay, as a little birthday gift to me, could you just rate and review, just put the 5-star review on it, or be honest, whatever. If you don't like it, put it fucking 3 stars. I don't care. Just do it. That'd be great. And it's just a nice little favor for me. Thank you very much. You can also visit our website, psychicstatic.net is what it is. And, if you want to help me out in a financial way, just make a purchase there. Okay, I have records for sale. I have links to my eBay store. I have releases that I have put out from other local bands, Hammer Party and Narnia. And would like to keep on doing that. So if you make a purchase, I can continue. And I appreciate that. Thank you very much, folks. Enjoy.
Matt Martinez, nice to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Just to right off the bat, the topic of discussion was going to be Drive Like Jehu's Yank Crime, and it turned out to be pretty difficult to do research on that album.
Yeah, and when Curran presented, this opportunity, I started thinking of impactful records, and I tried to find something that both resonated throughout my musical life and was available because a lot of the records that I'm like, oh, this had a huge impact in my youth or in my teen years or whatnot, wiped from the internet, no information, and that kind of leads to a dead end conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I would have and would have done my best to do what I could. Obviously, if I can't find the material to listen to at all, that would really put me at a disadvantage.
Yes.
But Drive Like Jehu, I mean, that's like they're like a pretty sizable band. I mean, they certainly have had an impact. I think that they are very well known for being like an indie or an underground band. This album specifically, I was just like really hopeful because I was just like, oh well, at least that album is on the internet. I know I'll be able to find it. On the I know I'll be able to listen to it. But as far as like interviews with that band is concerned, they don't speak about this album in depth.
No, and at the time, I mean, for being a major label release, there wasn't a lot of press. And this is back in the day where pre-internet, we were scouring magazines, looking for anything, looking for video interviews, content, that kind of content that we now usually have at our tips or our fingertips, just wasn't there. It created a lot of mystery.
Yeah, yeah. And so let's see, this album came out in '94, right?
1994.
So, how old were you in '94?
I was 18 years old. I was just graduating high school when this came out. I think right before I graduated, I think was when I saw them on the tour supporting this album.
Oh, okay. So you got to see them in '94.
Yes, I saw them twice. So I latched on to them and a lot of the bands that were on their previous label, Cargo Headhunter, which was a San Diego-based label. Drive Like Jehu, I think, was the first band that I was turned on to on that label, and because of again that lack of information, we would look at the back of record covers and say, oh, if it's on this label, maybe I'll like other bands on this label. And it started with their self-titled, and I latched onto a lot of bands from that scene. So I saw them, the first time I saw them was probably 92, 93. It was a show with Drive Like Jehu, J Church, who was also a very impactful band for me, Bay Area melodic punk band. Tanner, which was Gar from Hot Snake's band, and Digits. And it was at a skate park. It blew my mind, and I was completely into that self-titled LP. When they played mostly new material that wasn't even released yet. So it was overwhelming. It wasn't familiar. That made me a little uncomfortable, which was awesome. It made you want more of these little hooks got caught in your mind. And just really created a lot more of that mystique.
Okay, and so this was '94. This is the first time you saw them.
That first time was probably late '92, early '93.
Oh, okay.
And then when they released Yank Crime, I saw them in '94 on that support tour.
And what was that show like?
That show was at a small bar. It ended up being an all ages show, and Tanner supported, and then there was a local support called Teeth. They were a band from Tucson. And it was a great show. It was very loud. It was very packed. I think at that point there was a lot more momentum and underground hype, and a lot of kids came out.
Yeah. Okay. And wait, so this was where?
This was at a bar in Phoenix called the Mason Jar at the time, and it was like a glam metal bar that did some punk shows and some other indie type shows. So yeah, it was a very intimate setting.
Okay, cool. So wait, so you said Phoenix. You were in Phoenix now, correct?
Yeah, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm born and raised. Been here nonstop.
Oh, okay. All right. So the times you've seen them have always been in Phoenix.
It was the first time was in Mesa, which is one of our suburbs, at a
Oh,
skate park, and then Phoenix the second time.
okay. So, so speaking of being born and raised in Phoenix, what was that like? You know, being raised in Phoenix. What was it like in the household?
I mean, it was great. You know, had the nuclear family. Um, Dad was ex-military. You know, we had the suburban VA HUD home. Um, very typical. We lived in a small suburb that was it's part of Phoenix, but it was on the edge of town, and that was always the idea. Move to the edge of town. That's where the newest builds are happening. That's where the newest communities are being built.
Hmm.
Um, as I grew up and through high school, that part of town kind of shifted a lot of gang activity, drive-by shootings in the 90s. Um, and from there, once I graduated high school, I ended up moving to Tempe, Arizona, which is where Arizona State University is located. Um, didn't move there to go to college necessarily. I moved there to be involved with other musicians and where a lot of things were happening, and it was very acceptable to network with other musicians and form bands and go on tour.
Yeah. Well, so what was music like for you as a kid in that house?
My parents were not very musical. They would have fit well in this generation where it's very single driven rather than album driven. So they didn't latch on to specific bands and be like, I need to have everything in their catalog. They played a lot of oldies, 50s, 60s rock and roll. I remember them having, we'd go on road trips and listen to tapes that they had. I remember they had a Queen tape, Eddie Rabbitt, Statler Brothers,
Hmm.
Freddie Fender, just kind of all across the board, which was interesting. Nobody in my family, immediate or connected, aunts, uncles. Nobody was a musician. Nobody played instruments. Um,
Hmm.
I I loved it. I think I navigated through kids I met in elementary school to skateboarding, which the natural progression was Thrasher magazine,
Hmm.
which introduced me to punk rock and heavy metal. I would say my first gateway was a lot of skate rock, punk rock bands, Misfits, Black Flag, things like that. But then that naturally progressed to Metallica in the mid '80s,
Okay.
and that was what drove me. I was like, this I want to play bass. Cliff Burton. I connect with this, and I begged my parents, I want to play bass. I want to play bass, and they're like, you won't stick with it. And then eventually they gave in, got me a bass, and I took lessons for a while. And my teacher was '80s glam metal dude. And the first thing he said is, "You like all this punk rock stuff?" He said, "Just start a band. You're going to learn more playing with other people
Hmm.
than you are by studying theory and learning how to shred."
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
which may have been bad advice, and I've spent years going through and trying to correct bad habits. For instance, because he was like, just learn to play with a pick. Picks are cool, playing punk stuff like it works. So I never developed like a traditional finger style bass playing until later in life. I've messed around with that, but I'm still dominantly a pick player. So
Yeah.
it's that good foundations that set the narrative of my musical journey, but it definitely wasn't a scholarly journey, I guess.
Sure. Well, I mean, did you really ever, continue on with your musical education and like, did you follow through?
Sporadically, and I started I in college I started taking some music classes, but then it really never made sense to me for a career.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was paying for college tuition, and I was like,
Oh,
probably
yeah.
not worth pursuing music if I'm not going to be a music teacher or get involved in intense studio musicianship or anything like that. Um,
Oh,
but yeah,
okay. But so you followed his advice and you started a band.
yes,
And what
yeah.
was that?
Immediately found kids that played music similar or somewhat similar. I went to Catholic school. I went to a really small school. My graduating class was probably 40 people.
Oh,
So finding people that were into quote unquote alternative cultures was difficult. And so you end up latching onto kids that have adjacent interests, which was great because I was playing in bands with kids that introduced me to a lot of gothic rock and other kids that were heavy into, a lot of alternative music and or death metal. It was a really good experience, like being kind of forced to work within the confines of your environment. Like, okay, we're all stuck here. We're all kind of the outsiders. Let's just try and make this work. So yeah, in high school, I formed some bands that were, fun, but not productive. Didn't really know what we were doing. Just kind of, took the DIY course very seriously. Of okay, well, there's really no rules. Let's just kind of have fun with it and see where it goes.
you said this was high school?
That was in high school. Yeah, that's when I first started playing in bands that played shows and got involved with DIY punk scene. Met other bands, got exposed to a lot of other music, and just it kind of just snowballed from there into this world that I can't escape.
Right. Wait, okay. But so you're starting high school, starting these bands. So I'm assuming this is around like 1990.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we made a little bit of a jump there. So like from when you were growing up as a kid with your parents in the house and being exposed to like their tape collection, which was mostly a lot of that 50s rock stuff, Statler Brothers and Freddie Fender, I think you said, and stuff like that. Where did you start? Like when do you think it was that you started getting interested in music? Was it that stuff that kind of turned you on, and then you kind of went on and found your own stuff, or what?
No, I really think it was skateboarding introduced me to punk rock, which was in the 80s. That was probably like 85, 84, 85.
Yeah. Well, so how did
Yeah.
that was that introduction? Like who introduced you to skateboarding or Thrasher magazine?
The kids in the neighborhood. Kids in the neighborhood were skateboarding. I got a skateboard.
Yeah.
We hung out. We read Thrasher magazine. It was like, okay, well, this is the uniform. This is what we listened to, and you just kind of latch onto it.
Oh, okay. So there's kids in the neighborhood. Did you have siblings at all that were interested?
No, I have a sister, and she is the furthest removed from anything in this world.
Oh, yeah, sure. Younger or older?
She is a year younger than me.
Okay. So you guys were close, but not like connected really.
Correct. Yeah. Close in age, but definitely. And the more and more my musical taste and involvement in the music scene increased, I would say our relationship definitely never connected.
Right. Yeah.
She didn't understand why I was doing all these things and not having just a quote unquote normal life.
Right. Yeah. Well, so and what was that, do you think? I mean, because like these kids introducing you to punk rock culture and to Thrasher magazine as a young kid, I'm assuming somewhere around 12, right?
Yeah, 10 to 12 probably. I mean, it was pretty young.
Yeah.
And making tapes for each other, trading, passing along tapes and whatnot. I mean, there was just something, I don't know if it was defiance. I mean, obviously there's in any kind of subculture, counterculture, there's that sense of defiance and rebellion. But there was something about the music I just connected with, and when I kind of put together that anybody could make that art and share that art,
Yeah.
it kind of started making more and more sense. And that was probably around 12 or 13 was when I started understanding, oh, I could play in a band. I could learn an instrument and probably make this happen. It might not be great, but I could probably, piece this together.
Right. So it was like 12 or 13 that you picked up the bass?
It was 13 when I picked up the bass.
Okay.
And then probably by 14, probably, within a year of practicing and taking lessons, I felt enough confidence to try and play with people and kind of just dove into that.
Okay. And why bass?
Cliff Burton. I mean, Metallica, there was something that just gravitated to me that this is my instrument. This is what I'm going to play.
Yeah.
I don't know if I understood it. I don't know if I understood where it fit in the band at the time.
Right.
And also maybe being so tall. I mean, by the time I was in junior high, I was at least 6 feet tall.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, this is the bigger instrument that fits me.
Yeah, right.
So it could have been just a physical attraction to the bass.
Sure, sure. But I mean, Cliff Burton, I mean, that's massive sound, you know. I mean, like he really kind of cut through those early Metallica records and like, you know, he would like solo. So it's just like it
Yeah,
kind of like gave you an opportunity to hear the bass. Like whereas like, you know, I think when I was experiencing music as a kid, it's just like I barely understood like the difference between a guitar and a bass guitar. You know, it's just like I was just like, well, you know, I think the thing that stuck out to me was you got a few years on me. So when I was like 12 or 13, I think Faith No More's The Real Thing came out. And so
hmm,
the song Epic was the big thing on MTV. And that's around the time that my brother, who was older than me, was interested in playing music, and he started already taking guitar lessons. But I remember him asking me, he was just like, you know, what's a song that like you would like a lot? And I remember saying Epic, and he was just like, okay, well, what do you hear that sounds interesting? I was just like, well, what's making that sound? Like it goes a doo doo
yeah,
doo, you know, and then he was just like, oh, that's the bass. I was like, okay, that's what I want to do then.
awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, Cliff
Yeah,
Burton.
no, and I think about that, and I think about the Metallica journey, and I'm lucky that it picked up or it began for me with Cliff Burton because he was a very apparent in the mix bass player.
Right.
Had I found Metallica at And Justice for All, there's barely any bass in there.
Right.
It's hard to dissect. I remember getting the bass tablature book for And Justice for All, trying to play along to the recording, and I was like, I'm lost. I can't figure this out. Um, and then years later, I understood. Oh, he was mixed down in the mix, and it's this notorious thing. But I think with a lot of like heavy music, yeah, bass can get lost.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that it's one of those unsung instruments where, you know, a lot of the times people don't really consider the importance of it and how it kind of fills out sound. And, you know, it depends on the band too. I mean, like if you're listening to like the Everly Brothers or something, I mean, like I don't think I can think of any bass in those songs, you know, because
Yeah,
it's just so not important. But if you listen to like, you know, some funk and some R&B, it's like it's very apparent.
yeah, no, it drives the song, and I think as a musician, I start hungering for understanding those genres that I didn't necessarily embed myself with as a musician.
Yeah.
So I've definitely there's been times where I've tried to dissect you know funk songs, disco songs, just because of those bass lines drive, whether they're real or synthetic. And it's cool. It expands your mindset. Um, Kind of gives you an understanding of, or at least a partial understanding of where other musicians were when they were working their part into that song.
Sure, sure. Did you ever have any interest in playing anything else, or was it always bass?
I tell people I've owned guitars, and I do own guitars, but it's always been bass.
You don't know how to play guitar, really?
I know how to play. I know how to play basic. I don't have like a huge chord library. Like a lot of bass playing is more singular notes, and I understand guitar and I understand how chords stack and build. But no, I never wanted to be that bass player that felt like they needed to step into a real instrument and shine there. It's like a common drummer symptom where your drummer shows up with an acoustic guitar and they're like, I'm tired of being behind the drum set. I want to be a front person. I want to be up in the front. And I've known many guitar players that picked up. I mean, many drummers that picked up guitar.
Right.
So it's something I was comfortable with, and I was like, okay, I'm grounded in this. I understand where I fit in the band. Um, and as I've gotten older and played with more musicians and better drummers, that connection between the bass player and the drummer, one day I played with a really good drummer and it just clicked. And it was
Hmm.
like, okay, I understand I don't understand how to play drums, but I understand that interaction between their foot and my instrument. And I think that's definitely important. The language, the unspoken language that musicians have. It's not innate. It's something that I think you learn.
Yeah. I was going to ask you something. I didn't know when it would come up, but it sounds like it's now. Considering you're such a devout bass player, I'm a bass player too. And considering we were going to be talking about Drive Like Jehu and Yank Crime specifically, I think that the bass is a very big part of this album and this music.
Mm-hmm.
I think that bass is obviously a very big part of your existing band, your current band, Common Moons, and the new album I have already listened to. And do you think you have like your own sound? Like, what do you think about your
Yeah, I
sound?
mean, that's a difficult question because like I don't feel that I'm, one of those musicians that's going to go down in history as like an iconic player or anything like that. But I feel that through my experiences, I've developed a sound that feels very personal to me, and it's based on a lot of different influences. Some of them I think would be apparent. Others were built from just experience. I play with a lot of distortion, and that comes from that world of previously playing in death metal bands. There's something about that grit on the bass that I like. But then, David Sims from Jesus Lizard, highly influential, very punctuated bass lines, still having groove. And I don't think I have as much groove as him, but there's something about the way his bass cuts through that I fell in love with.
Oh,
Same
yeah.
with Bob Weston from Shellac. So, a lot of it was, especially with Common Wounds, it was a lot of ideas of the sonic placement of everything. To me, the set, what I heard from the band throughout us developing songs and rehearsing was this bass and drum driven song with guitars that add, even though the guitars are very dominant and probably the driver of the song, they are texture and kind of the balance. They create the room, they create the feel. Whereas as the bass and the drums are just kind of driving everything forward. So yeah, I would say, yeah, there are some things that are very distinctive. I don't think there's anybody I'm outright copying.
Yeah.
And I think that's an amalgamation of influence. It's like I said, it's the heavy metal thing, the death metal thing, love of this, the noise rock stuff, and just love of the instrument. I mean, we could go on. We could have a whole episode just talking about bass players that influenced me, and it's a long list. It's
Right.
and some that don't directly relate with what I'm currently doing.
Right. Well, the thing that I was thinking about was because first of all, you're surrounded by gear, and I think I saw Travis Beam, was it bass?
This is an electrical guitar company bass, which it's all aluminum. The fingerboard, the body, it's all hollow aluminum.
Yeah.
The Travis Beam was the influence and built in the 70s. Those are wood bodies with aluminum necks and wood fingerboards. I'm very lucky that I own one of those as well. But the electrical is what I've been playing. Kevin from Electrical was influenced by Travis Bean and started doing his own take, and now he does the authorized reissues of Travis Bean guitars and basses.
Oh, okay.
So he's carrying on that lineage of machinists building instruments, which is interesting because there's something that's very organic about what we know about traditional guitars and basses. From acoustic guitars and upright basses forward, it was always very wooden, handmade, handcrafted woodworking artistry, and there's something about the aluminum that, again, it cuts through. It has a very, very punctual, defined sound.
Right.
Once I got into it, I was like hooked.
Well, I mean,
I
because like messing with your sound, like I mean, because the thing about bass is that like I think if you use the right kind of amp and just kind of turn it up, like you'll like kind of like what guitarists will say about a Marshall is like if you just like you don't even need a distortion pedal if you just like crank it, right? And you just kind of like let those
yes.
natural freaking tones kind of take over. So I mean, like, do you mess with your sound as far as like pedals are concerned, or like equalizers or anything like that?
So a few years ago, I went into the world of modeling profiling units. I use a Line 6 Helix as
Okay.
my preamp. So that unit, it models a multitude of amps and effects units. Um, so I build everything in the quote unquote in the box in the effects unit,
Hmm.
and then feed that into a power amp into the speakers. So it's a little synthetic. The technology is pretty insane.
Sure.
So the model I run for my bass amp, it's a Galen Kruger, very 800 RB, very tried and true bass amp, and that's the foundation of the tone.
Yeah.
I do use a fuzz pedal in front of that, but in general, not a lot of effects. I 100% agree with you that you know there's something magical about just plugging in a standard instrument into a good amp that sounds great with the right player.
Hmm.
Um, One thing I really learned, and this is from working in music stores and with music companies, um, so much of that sound is in that player's hands.
Absolutely.
I've seen world class musicians pick up a inexpensive practice amp and a student level guitar and play and sound close to their albums. It's I'm like there's something magical in those hands. They're the way they attack that instrument.
No,
Um,
I think that's true. I mean, like, I think I made the comparison because I was doing research on Don Caballero, right? And
mhm.
so Che, the drummer, I remember watching a video of him playing, and I was watching him play B8 hi-hats. And I was
Yeah.
just like, those are the worst hi-hats you can buy. Cheapest, they suck, but like that's what he uses, and he's been using right along. And I was just like, well, there you go. It's the player, it's not the instrument.
Very, very true.
So that's cool. Okay. Well, yeah, so I just wanted to kind of think about that a little bit because obviously bass is very important to this record. Obviously, it's very important to you. I think that your sound is very good, actually. I mean, like, I've listened to your previous EP as well as the new record, and it sounds great. I
Thank
think
you.
I think you do a good job.
I think it's a struggle because I think the gearhead mentality is always at conflict to me with that. You don't need great gear to be a great musician, and I 100% believe that. I feel privileged that I was able to acquire some interesting instruments and gear. But is it necessary? No. And if things changed and I was playing through a P bass through a good loud clean amp, we'll make it work.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, because like that punchiness that you're talking about, like that almost like kind of metallic, kind of like
Yeah,
what like the Jesus Lizard. It's just like you kind of have to have something that's going to emulate that harsh tone to it. I mean,
I
like
think I think it helps. I think it helps tremendously.
yeah, but there's something that you use obviously that kind of makes it kind of cut through a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. So punk rock in middle school, let's call it.
hmm
Uh, get turned on to Metallica. So how does Drive Like Jehu come into the picture?
When I entered high school, I was that confused mess of influence. I remember the first day of school in one of my classes, the teacher had everybody introduce themselves, said, give your name and your favorite musician. And I
Okay.
said, my favorite bands are Jane's Addiction and Napalm Death. And everybody's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Um, so it was already eclectic in the things I was interested in. But then I meet a kid and he's like, Jane's Addiction, I love them. And we start talking about music. He's like, have you heard this band? Have you heard this band? And again, came into more, trading CDs, trading tapes, and started a band with this person. It was very floppy punk rock, and had another friend who ended up starting like a DIY record label, and he started flooding us with all these other things that, hey, check this out, check this out. And I think a lot of it was Nirvana related, because we were truly young teens when that explosion happened. I heard Bleach, and a friend was like, they have a new record coming out. This band's crazy. They're really good, and whatnot. And then the whole Nevermind explosion happened. What happened is I think some of these other kids started digging deeper. Oh, Nirvana did this split with the Jesus Lizard. I need to check out this band. Kurt Cobain was talking about the Melvins. I need to check this out. So we started finding all these bands, and it was all punk rock to us. We didn't have necessarily the genre definers that we have now. I think it was my friend Jeremy Yoakum that turned me on to that's the gentleman that ran the record label. Turned me on to Drive Like Jehu with their self-titled. And it just immediately connected to it. There was something about that band that wasn't as primitive as Nirvana or anything Nirvana adjacent. It wasn't as simple as punk rock or hardcore. There was something complex about it. There was a lot of interplay between the guitars, this angular sense of the guitars speaking back and forth, and it was one of those things where it was like, I don't know if I could ever play like this. I don't know how they do this, and it really expanded my my perception of what could be done musically without being like Steve Vai or some sort of shred music.
Yeah.
But it also had that complexity.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been a very big fan of Drive Like Jehu. I mean, I've heard about them like a long time ago, and I remember trying to listen to some of the music. I think I started with Yank, and I don't know if I got it immediately. I was just like, okay, it's cool, it's interesting, but I didn't really give it a good listen, because this one is particularly textured, which I think I missed all of the texture. I think I heard most of the screaminess. I think I heard most of the kind of like, aggressive driving guitars, but I definitely did not grasp anywhere onto the idea that this is a album that kind of was a predecessor to emo, or was associated to emo in any way.
Yeah, no, and I think it ultimately was. And with Yank Crime, the songs are really long.
Yeah.
So right. I think which was interesting for a major label debut. There's really only a couple songs that are in that 4-minute or less format. So that's why music videos weren't getting made or played, and songs weren't getting played on the radio.
Yeah.
So there maybe that was, from a professional standpoint, self-defeating. And maybe for the first time listener, it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they worked that into their contract. They didn't want to be beholden to be obligated to make music videos.
Okay.
I don't know if that is informed why they wrote songs as long as they did. I think that something else had to kind of inspired that, but they were definitely anti kind of music corporation thing, even though they signed the deal with Interscope. They definitely did not want to make music videos.
Yeah, and at the time, it seemed like Interscope was very interested in throwing art out there.
Yeah,
and I also heard that they didn't have any, Interscope didn't have any creative input to the record.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times we hear those horror stories of A&R people getting involved and rewrites and songwriters coming in and stuff, destroying an album.
Right. Yeah, they didn't have any. The contract they worked out was unheard of. Complete creative control. Mm-hmm. No input from the label at all. Like they handed them the record done with all the artwork, and it was just like, that's it. That is what it is. So, but I didn't know the first record either, you know, and like I spoke with Justin Pearson,
Yes.
and he he didn't choose the first Jehu album, but he definitely mentioned how that was a very important record to him. And only now, to prepare to speak with you, did I listen to that first album in its entirety. And I was just like, this is very pop compared to Yank Crime. You know, there's like a
Yes.
lot of real pop elements in here. I mean, it's still got a lot of the same thing. It's still got a lot of like, you know, Rick's kind of screaming vocals, and it's got a lot of aggression, and it's fast. Um, but it's not like this.
Yeah, no, they were definitely, it was definitely an evolution. Um, I think a lot of the people that were fans of the first LP took a while to warm up to Yank Crime, because it was an evolution. But there was, and I come from similar world that Justin did, and there was hardcore and punk DNA in Drive Like Jehu and the band that Rick and John Reese did before, which was Pitchfork. That there was definitely a lot of punk rock and hardcore influence or adjacentness, that resonated. It was like, oh, these people are our people. They come from the same scene. They're just doing something a little different.
Interesting. Okay. Well, yeah, I thought that was strange. So I do appreciate you choosing this album because I really needed to listen to it. You know, knowing it now, like listening to it now, there's definitely things about it that I missed in the past, and I'm really thankful that I can hear them now. And I can hear, obviously, thank you for choosing this album because from what you're telling me, obviously you could have chose something that could have been way harder to get into. But this album, I mean, I didn't expect it to be this difficult to find stuff on. So I think it's because Rick Froberg, you know, he seemed to be kind of private. You know, he kind of seemed to not want to shed too much light on like what songs were about or anything like that.
Definitely. And, I don't even know if up until recently, especially digging into this record, I don't know how familiar I was with all of the lyrics. There were pieces I would pull out, but he's got this drawl to his voice
Yeah.
that sometimes it's you're going to misinterpret lyrics.
Yeah.
And when I looked at some of the actual printed lyrics, it was pretty cool. It was seeing it from a different perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So you did a little bit of your own research on this album?
Yeah, I was like, I'm familiar with this record. I've been listening to it for years, fairly consistently. I would say that this is one of those records that's never left my rotation. But a lot of times that becomes passive listening, and you're so familiar with it, so comfortable with it, you don't question it or challenge anything. And it's I think it's the same thing if you were to ever sit down with an instrument and learn another artist's music and pick things apart. You start hearing things differently. You start understanding things differently. And yeah, so to me, in digging in and revisiting the lyrics while I was listening, gave it another dimension. I think there were a lot of one-liners in songs that really resonated with me, or just stuck in my brain. But then when I listened to it while reading along, his lyrics were very crafty. The use of metaphor, the use of, is he singing about this or is he singing about something else?
Yeah, it's very strong.
And I like that. I like interpretation. I like when I think there's a necessary component to music for some music to be very straightforward. And then especially from a lyrical standpoint, but then I also think there's that more complex lyric writing that leaves so much to listener interpretation.
Sure. It's like any good art, really. I mean,
yeah,
interpretation is kind of the best part about it, is that you kind of make it your own.
Definitely, definitely. But I think there's also that importance for I have one agenda. This is especially with like political music, protest music. It's like you're straight to the point, and that's important in its own world. It's just a different type of art.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's art with purpose, and then there's art for art's sake, I guess you could say.
Correct.
Yeah, I dig it. I dig it all. It just depends on how you feel.
100%.
So like getting into this band, I kind of want to start, getting into what I kind of came up with about this album, but I also don't want to skip over your musical history too much, and we haven't really talked about a lot of that. Because I know that you mentioned Metallica earlier as being like a primary influence on you, but you actually had an experience with them with one of your previous bands, right?
Yes. So the band I was in for the majority of the mid 2000s was a band called Landmine Marathon. We were a death metal band made up of all punk kids, hardcore scene kids. And we built up a lot of momentum and a lot of media interest. And that kind of came to a crowning moment when we got a call from Metallica that they were curating a festival in Atlantic City called the Orion Fest, and that James Hetfield had requested we play. So that the festival was a 2-day festival. The entire roster of the festival was curated by the band. Every member of the band picked a handful of bands, and this festival came together. It was in an airfield in Atlantic City. Pretty insane. I mean, when we talk about full circle moments,
Yeah.
How does that happen? How does this punk rock kid that's maybe a little self-doubtful about their abilities as a musician, get to the point of playing with that band that was the entry point?
Right, right. I mean, and how did that happen? Like, I mean, you're saying James Hetfield called you guys, but how did he get a hold of the album or the music?
I think because there was a media momentum at that point. We had some other fans that were connected to them. And I'm pretty sure that somebody that had previously worked with them put him in the loop. Put him in the loop and turn him on to us. I don't know how big of a fan he was, but enough to say, hey, we want this on the fest.
Yeah, that's pretty great. That's pretty awesome. So did you get to them?
I didn't. I was running around all day trying to do the media junket because so at that fest they had you doing all these different interviews, radio. It was pretty intense. My guitar player and drummer got to meet James. I ended up standing next to Lars at one point, but didn't engage him. Yeah, and it's that balance of like I don't want to be that guy. I don't want.
Right.
Although, and related to this conversation, another artist on the bill was Hot Snakes.
Oh, cool.
And the day before we both played, I ran into them at there was an artist section with food and drinks, and I was standing right behind Rick, and I had long hair at the time, wearing death metal shirts and whatnot, and I pull him aside. I'm like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that you're one of the reasons I play music. And he was taken aback. It's like it's hard to connect. You see this obvious metal dude.
Yeah.
How did this happen? And we talked a little bit, and he's like, oh, that's cool. That's awesome. So it was like a full circle moment upon a full circle moment that I got to at least say my piece to an artist that influenced me. Hopefully not in a cringy fanboy way. And it becomes more meaningful in reflection when, obviously he recently passed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know.
So it's like, I guess my takeaway is if you have somebody that affected your life, talk to them. If you have that chance, say something.
Right. Just try not to be blubbery. Just be really matter of fact. It's like I really dig you.
Exactly, and it was a short conversation. It was a couple minutes. It wasn't. Hey, come back to my van. I want to talk to you more.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. I hear you. I mean, I'm sure it was cool. He seems like a cool guy. Or he seemed like he was a cool guy. But that's great. It was such a great experience for you, and then like how fortunate too. It's like not only did you get that, but invite by Metallica to play their festival, but then to also run into another one of your idols.
Yeah. No, it was a crazy kind of a whirlwind weekend. And yeah, I'm very grateful that everything fell into place with that.
Yeah.
Um,
You think maybe you'll send Metallica the new record from Common Wounds?
I always feel uncomfortable with pushing it on friends
Sure.
and I wouldn't say they're friends, but people I have like a connection or some sort of connection with.
Yeah.
Do you want to push the limits of that relationship by injecting business? I have a couple friends that have been successful in music, and it's always it usually happens organically where things get where they need to be. I don't try to push things like, hey, I know you're successful, can you take a listen to this?
Right.
But yeah, if it happens, it usually happens on its own.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, obviously, it did happen in the past. I wish you the best for it regardless. I hope that it does make it to the hands of the appropriate channels that can, do something like that, something similar to that in the future. Because it's a great album, I mean, and like, I know what you're saying. Like, it's always, you feel like an idiot trying to be like that shameless self-promoter, but at the same time, like in this business, right? Like you kind of have to be, like,
yeah. And it's that conflict between, I'm an artist and there's a business aspect to it. And there's commitment to selling records and trying to recoup the expense. But then there's also and maybe this is how I justify it to myself in the marketing side of things, is I just want people to hear the music. I want somebody to connect to what we're doing and take something away from it. And that's more important to me than selling records, than success or whatnot. That, to me, that's the success.
Right.
And if somebody hears our record, and a young person hears the record and decides to start playing music, I would love to be a part of that. I would love to be one of those people that's a catalyst for somebody to create on their own.
Right, absolutely. I mean, and even better, than like, the kind of shameless self-promotion route is just like, just prove it, right? Prove it yourself.
Yeah.
Start doing, you guys do shows, you guys are going to go on tour probably. Just go out there and prove it every night, and then that's all the justification you need, right?
Exactly.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, then let's do this. Let's get into Drive Like Jehu's Yank Crime.
Awesome.
So the first fact I found out was that the band named itself after a passage from the Bible.
Yes.
Which I was not familiar with. The passage is from 2 Kings 9:20. I don't know. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he drives furiously.
And for me, like, having that Catholic school background, it was interesting because I knew they weren't a religious band, and I wasn't a religious person. But I liked that obscure reference, But yeah, that's an interesting, it's like, oh, are they religious? Are they just, finding something interesting in a historical book?
Right. I mean, and well, so you were actually already interpreting it. I mean, like you knew the passage, like you knew the reference.
I didn't know the passage. I think it's one of those just like shared knowledge telephone games back then, pre-internet. Somebody was like, "Oh yeah, it's from the Bible," but then, like a lot of their artwork had trains. They had a T-shirt with a train on it, and I was like, "Drive Like Jehu was Jehu a train operator?" You start creating these stories, and kids say, "Oh no, it was this," and somebody figured out, "Oh, it's from the Bible."
Right. Okay. Oh, all right. So I didn't know if your Christian Catholic school upbringing, like if you had made, like if it was introduced to you or at some other point.
If so, it went right out in one ear, out the other.
Sure. As the rest of the education does. It's just got to make room. Got to make room in the computer. Just get rid of all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's like where Drive Like Jehu comes from. Like where does Common Wounds come from?
So that's one of those, interpretation names. Um, I always thought it could be interpreted on two levels. One being common shared wounds, like we all have emotional wounds and damages that we're dealing with, and there's a little sense of community in that we share that struggle.
Yeah.
But then the other is common wounds, like, oh, that's just a common wound. That's, just a knife cut. That's a common wound. So I thought it worked on both those levels. I thought it's something that, I think lyrically we try to go from the personal side of things. So, that first interpretation probably rings most true.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I will recommend to anybody, do not Google search common wounds without adding
Banned.
because the pictures are pretty disturbing and just not what you're looking for.
And I think that's always considered at this point is number one, is the band name already taken?
Oh, yeah.
Whether it be a successful band or someone else that recorded a demo, you don't want to necessarily step on those toes. And then number two, is it searchable? A lot of band names are not searchable, and that becomes difficult. I'm just looking for their music.
Right. Yeah, it can happen. But don't worry, I will provide links. Well, we won't steer anyone in the wrong direction.
No.
Let's see. So in a 2016 interview with Noisy, John Reese was interviewed, and he reflected on the album in the wake of the band's reunion because they obviously reunited briefly. He says, I think the second record holds up pretty well. I think because we recorded it in the way that we did and we spent so much time working on the record and thinking about it. For me, the wince quotient is really low in comparison to all of the records that I made during that time. There's always going to be something that doesn't sit well, and you have to wait 20 years for those things to happen, either sometimes literally the day or the week after, like, why did I do that? There's always those moments. But listening to Yank Crime again in preparation for getting the band back together and playing those songs again, I was really surprised. I was like, man, this really sounds great. And I'm really looking forward to doing this. End quote. So what can you say about the process for recording your new album, All Night Blood?
The process was intense. So we, shortly after we finished our EP that came out last year, we immediately started writing. And the plan was, let's just use this EP as a step off point to a full length. And we started cataloging riffs. I call it the riff catalog. We would jam, come up with parts, record them, hold on to them. Maybe they weren't right. Maybe it wasn't a song. It wasn't going to develop. And then it kind of just dragged on. And we hit a point where we're like, I think we have enough material for an album. So we started dissecting and putting things together and demoing here in our rehearsal studio and booked the studio time. And I think we were like, let's focus a lot of time on recording. Let's get this right. Let's give everybody room to breathe. So many times in the past, especially with punk and hardcore bands, it was, we've got an album to record. Okay, so we're going to do 2 days to record it and a day to mix it, or a day to record it and a day to mix it. And it's a very rushed, you get what you get, which is cool. And there's an energy and there's a passion that's associated with that some amazing records were made rushed and with no budget. But I was like, we have the opportunity to spend some time in the studio, maybe develop some of the songs in the studio, add to them, build some density, and kind of get what we hear in our heads onto the actual record. So I think we spent about a month and a half in the studio, not every day, but 2-3 days a week, few nights a week, and really got to kind of dig in on a granular level without compromising our original intent. But it was, let's rework this part. Let's add to this. Let's embellish this guitar part to make it sound bigger. Let's add some synth here. Let's add some string pads to kind of build this up. But let's not make it overwhelming because we still want to produce the same sound live. And that was cool. Auxiliary percussion, something I've never done. Our drummer and our vocalist did a dual drum part. Added other percussion instruments. It was really fun. Um, Maybe the length of time was a little strenuous for some of us.
Mhm.
I would say, especially with vocals, we pieced the vocals together over multiple days as to not burn out our vocalist Ian.
Oh yeah.
So rather than just booking a couple days to record vocals, we'd book partial days so he could go and focus on one song and burn out his voice on that one song, rather than getting through three songs and then he's done and we can't do any more. So that was good, and it gave him a chance to drill into the lyrics and make sure everything felt right and it was placed right. Um, so that was a great experience. Um, the immediate response when I listen to the mix, you always, as a musician, I think you always listen to your own recorded music under a microscope. That's not reality. So I let it sit for a while, stepped back, then went and listened to it, and it was like, okay, I think we conveyed what we wanted to.
Okay,
But
cool.
it's hard to see it that way because we hear, oh, I heard a squeak in my string right there that no one on earth is going to hear. Well, there's going to be somebody that's going to hear it, but that kind of stuff. I think musicians become very overly critical of.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's great. I mean, it's I mean, it sounds
And
like
I don't say that from like a cocky standpoint, but that's just the honest truth. I'm extremely grateful for the guys I'm playing with and what we did. And then I guess looking back, it's like, oh yeah, there were probably some times where I pushed people too hard, like uh retakes, like, oh, we need to get in this day, we need to get in this day, we need to do more. And that becomes stressful, and a lot of art comes from stress.
right. Sure, sure. Well, I mean, like you already described how the recording process went. You guys obviously took a lot of time, so it's not like I'm expecting that there was going to be any disastrous things about the recording. I mean, and I listened to it. I mean, I think it sounds great. So,
Yeah,
but
any of the disasters we were able to course correct in the studio because we had that extra time.
Yeah.
We had a couple equipment failures, we need to rethink what amps we're using. But we weren't, the pressure wasn't on to, no, you gotta do it right now, just make it work.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, when you have the privilege of time, I mean, you definitely clean up everything that you can. So that makes sense. Um, so now we were talking a little bit about this earlier, but in comparing the first album and the second album of Drive Like Jehu, I know that multiple band members of Jehu have cited Slint's Spiderland as a major influence on helping them feel more comfortable in incorporating more dynamics into the music, which is obviously, like you were saying, like Yank Crime is very much a departure from where the first album was. So they're doing more noises, lengthening out parts. Are there any other albums that you could point to that you think may have helped inform the direction of your new record?
Of our new record,
Yeah.
I think with the band, always we tried to focus on the music that held true from our youth, being the '90s. Um, and then if I cite bands that influenced us, I don't think they necessarily translated into the songs to where we sound like a facsimile of them. But obviously, I think Helmet was a big one. Jawbox, Unwound, and then there's things like Smashing Pumpkins. We hear, or Soundgarden. We hear these things. It's like, oh, that riff kind of sounds like it could have been maybe adjacent to Soundgarden, and we're like, that's the Soundgarden part, and it's not, and no one's going to hear it. But you're able to add your own twist.
Right.
So I mean, the influences. I know as a band, we spend a lot of time chit chatting at our rehearsals and discussing either nostalgia or what we're interested in or new music we've heard. So we always keep that dialogue open, and I think that's constantly causing other members to go and listen to things or revisit records. You know, there's a band called Link, Lync. They were a Pacific Northwest indie emo-ish band in the 90s, and there's a lot of melodies and a lot of the way the bass lines work that probably influenced me quite a bit, because I know there was a period when we were writing where I was revisiting that band and listening to them. You know, a lot of the mid 90s post-hardcore emo music, a lot of the Southern California scene, bands like, and I'm gonna reference, you know, some bands that might be obscure to a lot of people, but like Torches to Rome, Yaphet Kotto, you know, bands Southern California to the Bay Area that were putting out these very emotionally driven records that had a lot of dynamic shift between jangly guitars and ferocious hardcore riffs. So, you know, it's you know, it's really an eclectic mix of influence.
Okay, cool. So another thing that was interesting to me was that it seems to me that the conception of Jehu came from two bands that were fans of each other, and you know, both bands breaking apart at around the same time, and then eventually finding each other and you know, knowing each other, like were great musicians and amazing at what they did, and managed to kind of get together and create this new band. So did Common Wounds have a similar kind of background?
Yeah, I mean, the core of the band was me and Ian, who's the singer vocalist, the vocalist guitar player. He was in a band called Run with the Hunted. They were a melodic hardcore band that was active, you know, in the mid 2000s. Toured a lot, put out an album, toured the U.S. multiple times, toured Europe, and then me with Landmine Marathon, we were touring quite extensively, and we'd talked in the past about doing a band based on some of those 90s influences. And then this dates back to, I think our first conversation was probably 2013, 2014. And both of our bands wound down, weren't as active or ceased. And we started talking a little bit more seriously, and it was like, let's do a band without any pretext, without any pressure. Because when you're in an active touring band that's working these release cycles, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to produce and to be active, go on tour. And both of our lives had started to change a little bit with family and career. And it was like, well, let's do this on our own terms. Like, you know, we don't have to go on a multiple month tour cycle, but we can do this in a way that's comfortable for everybody, and just make music that we like and see if we find audience, see if people are interested.
Okay.
So yeah, it was definitely two active musicians that maybe wanted to become a little bit less active.
Yeah. And what about the other guys in the band? They came from other bands too, right?
Yes. So our drummer, Steve, he relocated to Phoenix from San Jose, California, during the pandemic, and we found him on Craigslist, which is notoriously the worst place to find a musician or a roommate or anything. And he put this ad out, and it hit a lot of the post-hardcore influence. You know, obviously a lot of the DC bands, you know, Fugazi and Quicksand, and then you know, I was like, let's write this guy and see if he might be interested in it, and it just immediately gelled. It was that musical language he was able to. We showed him some riffs, and he started playing. We're like, yeah, we don't need to tell you what the part needs. You understand what we're trying to convey. And then our guitarist Corey played in a band called Seas Will Rise. That was a band that was fronted by another former member of my band, Landmine Marathon. So there was a family history there. and knew him for years, and he kind of brings a different dynamic in his guitar playing, and it just all kind of gelled.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, it was because I think the thing that I was thinking about was how these guys in Pitchfork and Night Soil Man were
Yes.
San Diego bands, and San Diego very much had a scene at that time. These guys were obviously very much a part of it. Like, so I was curious if like the members of your band and the previous bands they were in were also kind of like part of this Phoenix scene that you.
Yeah, definitely. I've known with the exception of our drummer, who's a recent Arizona transplant.
Mhm.
The other guys I've known for 20 years, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Our bands played together. Run with the Hunted would play Landmine marathons, record release shows. We definitely had a long history, and um, I think that was all related to all being adjacent in that hardcore scene. Um, and then in talking to Ian, um, before we even knew each other, it was like, oh, you were at this DIY show in 1995. Oh yeah, I was there too. Oh, we crossed paths at a show that probably 25 people were at and didn't even know, didn't even know each other. So it was some small world stuff that worked itself out.
Right. Yeah, well, that's what those scenes do, I mean, and that's what makes it kind of a scene, right? Is that all of you kind of, even if you don't know each other at the time, that's how you kind of get to know each other.
Definitely, definitely. It's a huge social experiment in forced communication, I guess. Just the situation makes us have to talk to each other because we're part of this thing that's small enough of a microcosm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's great. I mean, and it's also thankful that you guys were able to do it. That you guys managed to figure out, putting yourselves into a room with each other and then, getting creative.
Definitely,
It's a weird, unique experience.
it is.
All right, so I'm going to try to get through some of these songs. I'm going to skip a couple, but we're going to start with the first one. Here come the Rome Plows. Rome Plows were large, specifically modified armored bulldozers used in South Vietnam by the United States military during the Vietnam War.
Yes, and I think I only knew this in the past 10 years, and I think at one point years ago I was on the internet searching. I'm like, are they talking about Roman soldiers? And no, it was interesting, and it's I think those guys are similar age brackets to us, maybe a few years older. We're all the product of the Vietnam War. Our parents lived through the Vietnam War, and then there's a lot of interesting imagery and stories related to wartime, especially that war. So I thought that was pretty interesting that was the source of that title.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and it's effective, and like, I can't say for certain like what lyrically Rick was getting at with this. I mean, I think association wise, it's definitely like anxiety inducing. It's kind of chaotic. It's obviously like, really powerful. But no real idea of like if it was specifically like a anti-war song or something like that. Like just his his lyrical choices are very strange in that regard. Like we were talking about earlier, how it's just like it's very open to interpretation.
Yeah, very very abstract. But it's definitely powerful. Here come the Rome plows. It just sounds like some sort of epic force or machine coming through.
Right, especially the way he delivers it at that point, like for like kind of that chorus,
Yeah,
very powerful. I did hear Mark Trombino, the drummer, say that this was what he considered his most fun song to play. So I was wondering which song or songs off your new album do you consider the most fun to play?
the title track, "All Night Blood," that one um, came together at the last minute. It's a little bit different than the other songs on the record, but there's just something that's ignorant and impactful about that song. It's that emotional outlet. It's you know, that one sticks out. Mile markers become very, very fun to play live. Um, at the beginning, I think we all doubted that song and were questioning whether it fit the album, because it, not only lyrically but musically, it seems like it has a little bit more of a bright, positive spin to it. Whereas a lot of the other songs definitely, I feel, have a little bit more of a darker theme. But again, a very fun song to play, locking in with my drummer. Um, I would say those are probably two of my favorite. Um, and we're still fleshing out some of the songs for, for live performance, um, because some of the last batch of songs were written specifically for the studio, and then we're like, we'll sort them out and get them up to speed for live. Um, but yeah, I think those are the ones that really shine for me.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to Do You Compute? Again, kind of hard to figure out what's happening here with the song. Along with my research, found nothing about the recording process. So a lot of this is kind of my own interpretation on lyrics. Standout lyric I feel is "Don't need a tour of the pieces I'm missing." It's kind of like the thing that kind of grabbed me the most.
Yeah, it seems like that song lyrically is directed at a person. Obviously, it seems like it's a communication to somebody. There's something that he needed to say to the recipient of that song. Yeah, no, that's a great song, and the intro is piercing and maybe a bit excessive. It's repetitive. That beginning guitar riff, riff is high pitch and kind of drones and hypnotizes. I guess that would be an overall statement for that song to me. It's very hypnotic.
Yeah. Okay, I can agree with that. Also, I guess like with this album being a predecessor to what has become emo, this could be example of like lyrically some like very emotional subject matter. Obviously it's not clear what it is exactly, but there's something there that's very kind of personal and evocative, I think. But I was curious, like where do you stand on emo currently?
I mean, I think every theme becomes a theme park, as they say. I feel that when we look at the origins of emo post-hardcore bands like Rites of Spring, Embrace, that DC scene, it was very much a reaction to the machismo of hardcore, and it was the personal becomes political. We're not singing about burning down the system. We're singing about personal struggles, and it was very raw and honest. And I think that maintains, especially on an underground level. I think a lot of the themes got co-opted into pop music, which a lot of it's not bad. But I still think that there's very tortured lyricists that are connecting with their emotions and providing, honest writing about real experiences. And then it's that slippery slope of it just becoming a sappy, feel sorry for me love song. Which is that sincere? Maybe. But I think a lot of times when you revisit some of those, breakup songs, they're always difficult because time heals, and maybe those are the songs that become, a little bit cringy in the end. So I think there's always going to be passionate, emotionally charged bands and lyricists, and I think that exists. And I think there's a subset of young musicians that are embracing that world and that history. We have a lot of, I call them emo historians. These kids that were, are in their teens to 20s that are digging in deep and finding demos of this band that put out this very raw, emotional, like almost crying into the microphone record, and they found connection to it, and then they're presenting it in the digital form to the entire world. It's I was contacted on Instagram by a person who was archiving all these 90s emo bands, and he's like, hey, this band was from Arizona, do you know them? And I'm like, oh, I used to jam with those guys, and I didn't even know they recorded a demo. So I reached out to one of the members, and he's like, we recorded a demo, but I think I sent like 10 copies to friends, and it was like a boombox recording. And so I think there's always an interest, and I think as quote unquote emo music becomes more polished and to the point of being like pop rock, there's going to be that hunger to find something that actually connects and touches nerves.
Okay, very cool. Let's just move on to the next song, Golden Brown. So
Great song.
One of the shorter ones, which is interesting, and I feel like that was a thing that both Rick and John kind of like, when they moved on and ended up kind of like forming Hot Snakes, that was one of the things that they were like, we just want them to be short, fun songs, like just short blasts. We don't want these long, drawn-out things, So this is kind of more in that realm, I suppose. But lyrically, don't think there's much here. Like, it just leads me to like, because especially with it being one of the shorter ones, it just leads me to believe that there wasn't much real content there. Like, I don't know if there's like, I don't know if you kind of like look at the lyrics, like the chorus. The chorus just says, I ain't Bert, just golden brown, and that just kind of repeats it. Doesn't seem.
Yeah. I thought maybe, since Rick was an artist and illustrator and a painter, thinking about color in art, I took away a little bit of, brown is this dull color that's usually, undesirable. It's not vibrant. It's not vibrant. It doesn't stick out. It's very subdued. And I haven't really dug in a lot, but I figured there was some sort of metaphor to that, where he's saying, I'm boring, I'm dull. That's how you see me. That was kind of my initial take on that. Is it was a reflection on maybe how someone or people see him. Maybe a little bit of sarcasm.
Okay, I like that interpretation. I mean, like I said, it was very hard to find anything kind of definitive about Rick's writing process, though he did say in an interview that a lot of his lyrical content kind of comes from fear. That it's all very fear-based. It's all very like personal, but also from a place of like real insecurity and fear. So that makes sense, I think.
Which is I think that's a good emotion to connect with and to vent, because I think we all become self-defeating with insecurity on one level or another, and especially in music where there's so much posturing and a lot of smoke and mirrors and talking about how great and big things are. Every musician, I don't care how successful you are, there's that immediate level of insecurity of what seeking validation from strangers. What are they going to think? I think that's something we're all confronted with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's your interpretation. I like it. Cool, man. All right, well then let's move on. Let's move on to Luau. So I found this quote from in posttrash.com from Dan Golden, where he says, quote, "It's not exactly a happy song, lamenting the damage done to Hawaii in the name of ceaseless tourism."
Yes. And that's interesting when, I think that's always been a known fact about Hawaii that, they see the tourists as mainlanders and invaders. And I mean, when we look at even recent events, the fires in Hawaii that, it's devastated that region, and that sustained from tourism, but almost to a point where the people that do live there and call it home are suffering, but kind of swept away to make way for tourism because it's such a monolith and such a machine in motion.
Right. Yeah.
And then also, I think, there's a parallel maybe to their environment. I mean, being in San Diego, San Diego's an interesting place. It's very much a tourist hub. Tourist, and then some of the military installations around there. So it's an interesting environment, and you would think it's not conducive to punk rock, to bands, and somehow they've all made it work. That scene there has been great through the years. Playing shows there have always been a blast, and it's like, I think some of the impact of what's expected from that environment being tourist vacation town,
Mm-hmm.
contrasting creates that hunger and passion for music and for this underground community.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now in your bio, there's this statement about your song Mile Marker, which says, Mile Marker is a song of hope and a reminder to ourselves that we are capable of weathering the storm even when it feels like we are at our lowest.
Yes.
So I don't know, I felt like maybe these had similar sentiments, the theme behind Luau and maybe the theme behind Mile Marker.
Possibly. I mean, I think that's important to all of our sanity, is finding that center of hope. In so many aspects, we're confronted with and bombarded with negativity. And it's easy to get consumed. It's easy to dwell in that darkness. So I think finding hope, and maybe that hope is through positive change. Maybe it's through taking on the forces that are messing with us. I can see parallels.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like the video for Mile Marker kind of like shows scenes of like the surrounding area of like where in your neighborhood, I suppose, and like I think that connects something to like even the album artwork for Fallen Blood, right? Where I don't know what you would call it even. I'm not sure exactly like what to describe it as, but it's like there's some sense of deterioration, whether that be like societal.
100%. I think you kind of hit the nail there. So I assembled all the artwork and took all the photos, and basically visited a lot of locations in downtown Phoenix that are decrepit and disrepair and neglected. And Arizona's not that old of a state. We don't have a lot of old buildings.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I love about visiting the East Coast is you can see an actual old building, colonial New England, it's amazing. And it's something that we're devoid of here. So 100-year-old building, a 70-year-old building here is old. And unfortunately, progress has made it to where those buildings are undesirable. People don't see the value in holding on to that. Let's just mow that down and put up something new and modern that, can maximize profit. So we found a lot of locations that either it was mainly me and myself and our guitar player Corey. Places that we've seen in our journeys, like, oh, that building's interesting. I wonder what the story is with that, and took photos and subsequently took video of some of these buildings that were falling apart. And I think it's a reflection of how we sometimes put progress ahead of valuing beauty. But then there's also something beautiful about a building that shows its age. People that show lines on their face, there's something that shows character and maybe a story that either we're told or a story that we kind of fill in the blanks on.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I really like that. I haven't been through Arizona very much, but I did go to Phoenix on one occasion, and in the surrounding area, I think I was also in Tucson.
Mhm.
And I actually took a photo when I was down there, which I really, really like, and I kind of like have it framed in my house. I wonder if I could actually share it with you.
Oh, wow. That'd be awesome.
All right, you can see my screen, huh?
Yes. Well,
All
it's
right.
loading. There we go.
So I think this was taken outside of a place, and I think this may have been in Tucson. Like, what does that look like to you? Does that look like similar to structures in your neighborhood, or?
That looks like that is Tucson. Similar to some of the buildings in downtown that are still surviving, I would say that Tucson is a little bit behind on the mass change and tear down of buildings. They still have quite a few buildings with character and age. But yeah, that's definitely similar to a lot of the photos that are in the album artwork. Um,
You see that?
except for the buildings that I shot were this building in disrepair and neglect.
Yeah. Do you see that sign in the window?
I can't read it, but I see it.
Yeah, it's very small, but it says the machines are winning.
I'm sure that's Tucson. I mean, Tucson definitely has an eclectic art scene, and I think people that are more resistant to that kind of change and are holding on to a lot of the culture and character of the town.
There we go.
We're back.
All right. Well, I just wanted to share that with you because it's around your vicinity. Might not necessarily be your hometown or your neighborhood, but I feel like, and that was taken a long time ago. I took that 2004 or five, maybe.
Oh,
Somewhere.
wow.
So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we still have these sections that, I like to say the place that time forgot, where it kind of sits as a time capsule. And that's a good thing. It's just we keep seeing less and less of that in the name of progress.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, so yeah, I just wanted to share that with you because it was just so I knew about a little bit about the artwork for the album, and I just kind of had to even ask you about it, just kind of get an idea of like what is going on in the Phoenix.
And with the artwork, obviously we have that yellow building that's on the front cover, and continues to the back. But within the album, it comes with 9 postcards of different locations in similar states with the same blood neon sign.
Okay.
In the photo, each one relating to a song. So they're postcards that each are somewhat thematically related to the song. So it's hopefully people buy the record and they get to see the entire flow of the physical art to the sonic art.
Cool. That's great, man. I mean, like that's the best part about making physical media now, right? Like, is that you can actually share a story through the artwork and not just the music.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's something that was always magical about records.
Yeah.
The artwork was big, and you'd pull out inserts, and the Kiss record that would come with posters and catalogs for Kiss iron-ons or whatnot. It was that was always the magic to me. So we discussed when deciding to do this LP, discussed with our label, and he was on board to make it a cool package that had a lot of related content.
Cool, man. Well, that's great. Can't wait to see it.
Definitely.
Have to order it. Let's move on to another song. Let's see. Super Unison. Don't have anything for Super Unison or New Intro, being that being an instrumental song.
Mm-hmm.
So if we get down to New Math. Don't have much to say about this either, except I think it's hilarious that the song is called New Math, and it's got all these weird kind of time changes in it. Like, factors necessarily, but like the counts, like the measure counts are kind of off.
And that made me wonder if, well, my first thought was it's right after new intro. So I was like, are these songs related? Or were these like the working titles? You know, because obviously before you name songs, usually most bands have like names that just are placeholders. So was this the new math song because it was a new song and it was the mathy song? I don't know, because the lyrics don't really talk about mathematics or anything.
No, not really. And also, I actually, well, my thought was like, well, is this kind of like maybe Rick's little kind of play on words, considering, you know, Jehu was not only considered like an emo band, but they were also a lot of the times defined as a math rock band.
Possibly. I mean, I think that identifier came after the record. I don't even know if was math. I guess math rock was a term that was used in the mid '90s. Yeah, possibly.
Maybe. I'm not sure. It's all a mystery to me, really. Even still, even after.
But I think that's the magic of the record, is there was so much mystery, and there still is so much mystery.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, we're not going to be cracking any codes here tonight, but it's nice to get a different you know, perspective on it too.
Exactly.
So that only leads me to the last two songs, Human Interest and Sinews. Now, so let's see, the song Human Interest and then the next song Sinews seem to be very much connected lyrically. Where Human Interest says, quote, when I'm in doubt, when I'm in debt, when I'm in deep at your expense, then I owe you, I owe you, I owe. Whereas Sinews goes, quote, found yourself an asshole, find yourself a door, ain't gonna fix your leaks for you, ain't gonna watch the store no more, end quote. So kind of like this financial metaphor for interest in a relationship, possibly.
That's exactly what I took from it, is that their relationship songs about the investment in a relationship, not necessarily literal, but the emotional investment. And then, you know, Sinews is definitely the breakup song, but not in a sappy way. It's there's some anger, there's some definite anger in there, there's definite betrayal, and then there's dividing the assets. And we've all been through that, whether it's dividing the literal assets from a relationship or the emotional assets. Yeah, no, I think that's it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, whether the two of them actually really do have some kind of connectivity or not, I mean, I'm not sure, but it just seemed funny for placement.
And I know that Sinews was written well before the album. I think the reissue of Yank Crime has the original version, which was on the Headhunter Records compilation Head Start to Purgatory, which is a good document of San Diego at that time. And it was a more primitive version of the song. But, you know, I've definitely had instances where one of my songs has influenced another.
Okay.
You know, I don't think it's ever gotten to the concept point of having a part one and a part two of a song. And maybe that was subconscious, but I can see the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what I wanted to ask you was, so now I've always considered being in a band similar to being in a relationship. So I was wondering what do you think your personal interest is in being in your band?
I mean, it's fulfilling on so many levels. I've had a hard time being in bands with people that I didn't have friendships and relationships with. And then that happens, you know. I think a band is navigating multiple relationships and multiple personalities. You learn a lot about communication. You learn a lot about when to speak and when not to speak. And I don't mean that in a harsh sense, but if you're in a band with 4 or 5 other people, there's a lot of tension that just naturally creates itself. And I've learned internally when it's time for me to pump the brakes. Maybe I'm being too intense. Maybe I'm picking at somebody unintentionally or intentionally. So yeah, bands are a working study of how we interact and coexist. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to learn from healthy band relationships that can go into romantic relationships or business relationships. If you work in any kind of environment, office jobs with a team, with coworkers, you're doing that same thing. You're managing personalities, you're managing communication styles. Um, I think it's taught me more than I ever expected in that regards, to where I can take those experiences and those relationships and apply them to my day to day, my normal life, quote unquote, my day job. Um, and it's a magical thing. There's so much of a band that's driven by creativity, but there's another aspect that's really fun and social. It's the bandmates become like brothers and sisters. They know things about you that a lot of people don't. Everything becomes raw and open, and that's a great thing. I mean, that's something that I think a lot of people don't experience outside of one-on-one relationships.
Right. Absolutely. I can actually very much relate to that sentiment. Um, and like also, in addition to that, it's like, what do you think you bring to your band? Like what is your own kind of personal interest in the band, as far as it's like, what is your, like, if you looked at the band as like a four-piece, as a quadrant, and like every member of the band brings something, what are you bringing?
Definitely, I'm the strategy. I'm the person that's assessing risk and whatnot, like the driver of the business side of things.
Mhm.
So I look at the media connection and how we're going to try and find audience. Um, you know, other members contribute more in the primary songwriting, or you know, one of our members is more of a character in a ham, and he makes these videos that bring a little bit more levity for social media. He likes to joke around and play characters, and it's all aspects of personality, but it's just finding that balance between each other. You know, I used to, in my youth, I thought that bands had to run like a democracy where everybody gets an equal portion of the work, and that doesn't always work. I'm better about booking shows and making sure that merchandise is printed and distributed. If your best ability in the band is showing up and playing your instrument with 100% heart and passion, that's amazing, and that's an equal contribution. And I think it took a long time to realize that, and I think we have that, and it's working so far.
Yeah. Great, man. I mean, you can't ask for more in most situations. So,
Well, and I think that's why a lot of bands fall apart or lose members, because everybody's so ready to go and maybe overly passionate that their expectations of others become unrealistic.
sure. Or maybe even also that they don't realize where they fit in, or how they fit in, or that somebody is taking on like a responsibility that they don't necessarily know how to do, or they're just not, they're better off handing it off to somebody else, right?
Definitely, and I think maybe that translates to all of our human interactions.
Sure. I mean, I mean, some people I think can be oblivious to these things. This is speaking outside of band relationships as well. Just like, maybe you don't realize that, somebody is good at something, and you should just let them do that, and, appreciate that they have a special and unique talent that, you know, that's all they need to do.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. All right, man. Well, that wraps it up for discussing the album. I've got nothing else to say about Drive Like Jehu for the moment, except it was a great album, and thank you for choosing it so that I could actually spend time with it and really, really like indulge in it in the way that I should have a few years ago.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it. I had a wonderful time talking to you, and I know sometimes I meander in conversation, so I hope we
Oh, you kept it on the rails.
we got some points. But yeah, I appreciate your time. I love this record. I hope some of your audience maybe finds this as something new and listens to it and discovers something from it, or finds something adjacent from it. Maybe they're like, oh, this guy was in Rocket from the Crypt. I need to check out this band. Now that's my favorite party rock and roll band now. So it's all part of the journey and experience.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll find out about Common Wounds as well, and the new album, All Night Blood, which is being released by, who's putting it out again? I forget.
Protagonist Music. They're a label based out of Tucson. We're their 100th release.
Oh, that's right. So this is a very special.
It's he's had a prolific schedule of releases, many that flew under the radar. He's committed to putting out music that he personally connects with, and I can't argue with that.
Another big fan of the band. Huh?
Yes, big fan. Somebody that believes in us. I'm on board.
Okay. And you guys are pressing vinyl for this.
We're pressing vinyl. The Death Wish Inc. Store is distributing the record. Should be available everywhere.
Yeah, pre-orders now.
Allnightblood.com. That's the landing point.
Yeah, and the upcoming tour, like, what was that look like for you?
So because everybody has a lot of job and family commitments, we're not going to do any extensive touring. The plan is to do short regional bursts, meaning Southern California, Pacific Northwest, East Coast for a few days. We're working out the logistics now, and want to try and hit some places that make sense without being stuck in a van for 6 weeks.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it seems like most people are doing it that way right now.
It's there's nothing more defeating than being in a empty Midwest town on a Tuesday and playing for the sound person and the bartender.
Right.
It's I guess it's a rite of passage, but it's also a huge morale dent. I think you can be strategic and make it all make sense.
Yeah, right. I completely understand, man. Well, I wish you the best of luck with it regardless. I will order my copy as soon as I can. And thank you for taking the time and talking with me.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful.